Welcome everybody. I am the air quotes comedian, a man who every time he writes the word polemics wants to say Polemics. Yeah, every time I type it. And this is the Polemics. Welcome. The other day I was watching this stand-up comedian and part of their routine was banging on about how defective hedgehogs should be rounded up and exterminated. I don't usually heckle stand-up comedians, but I was pissed off and so I shouted, "Boo! That's an utterly and completely shitty thing to say. It's just not right, mate. You shouldn't say they're defective hedgehogs. You should say they're differently effective hedgehogs." Then I paused the video so I could go and make a cup of tea while thinking about the effectiveness of heckling a comic's pre-recorded performance. Upon returning with my piping hot cup of tea in hand, I thought, oh, I know, I'll leave a comment on the video. Nothing could possibly go wrong with that, so, I left a comment. 8 hours later, after drinking a pint of cheap Canadian whiskey, because who interacts on the social media when they're sober? See, I don't usually challenge opposing points of view in a confrontational way when I'm sober because, I always worry that I'll get crushed by a pile-on of people telling me I smell like arse. Case in point, on the Facebook the other day, an old friend of mine reposted a glossy meme about how true British people want to keep Afghan refugees out so that they don't destroy our country. I first caught sight of it when I was sober, and it was definitely a furrowing of the brow kind of post. And because I personally know this person, I was a bit reluctant to posit that they were full of shit and give the reasons why, worrying that their circle of friends might feel the same way as them, and see my response to their post, and then fly to the USA to take a piss in my cup of tea. Might improve the flavour. Later on, drunk me, who is a distinct entity in their own right, decided that a response was necessary, so I cracked my knuckles and typed my response. The first rays of the life-giving sun permeated through my eyelids, and blearily I opened my eyes. My first thought of the day was, it doesn't feel like I shit the bed again. Then, as I lay there performing my first ritual of the day, jerking off to my framed portrait of Karl Marx, I tried to recall the events of the night before. The events of the night before came before I did, and suddenly I remembered that I had written something on the Facebook in response to a racist repost. You know when you don't want to open up a social media because of something you posted while off of your face? Yeah, once you hit the upload button on that hedgehog sex tape you made, there's no clawing it back. I mean, I'd give it a try, but it hasn't even got one view yet. I can't remember who said it, but they said, everything on the internet lives forever. Oh yeah, I know who it was. MySpace.com. I really didn't want to open up the Facebook that morning, but we all have things we don't like to do, like continuing our existence as a species. But open it I did. I was expecting a virtual clubbing by a frenzy of alt-right types who had mistaken me for a seal because there was a lot of response to the post and some response to my response, some of which I responded to. Every single one of the responses supported the position I had taken with my response. I have no idea why I found this surprising, but I was surprised, surprisingly. Got a bit sidetracked from the definitely true story I was telling about the comedian calling for the extermination of differently effective hedgehogs. Well, that comedian responded to my post about his punching down on differently effective hedgehogs. The comedian said, "Where do you get off representing defective hedgehogs when you aren't even part of that community? I was being ironic, which is why what I said was funny." That rocked me back on my heels, like I'd been hit in the face with a mouldy head of lettuce. The comic was absolutely right. How dare I take it upon myself to speak on behalf of differently effective hedgehogs? I mean, I'm not even a hedgehog myself, so, Plus, I had no idea the comedian was being ironic. I mean, for example, when I hear comedians mocking disabled people, I just assume they're cunts. The comedian doing the mocking is a cunt, not the people they're punching down on. That's not to say a person who uses a wheelchair can't be a cunt, especially if they're using the wheelchair to beat an immigrant to death. I wiped the mouldy lettuce leaves from my face and, even though I was sober, I typed out my retort. Would you have done that bit in front of an audience of differently effective hedgehogs? I expected a reply on the lines of course I would. The actual reply was, of course I would, and they're defective. Facing off against somebody on the internet can be a bit risky when your online identity is tied to your actual identity, as much as it can be. How we present ourselves online can be reminiscent of who we are in reality, or we can choose to be an avatar who is far removed from our real persona. Once upon a time, I set up the Facebook account where I played the role of an attractive young conservative woman. No, I really did, and I did it for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that I did it for a laugh, but I didn't get many yucks out of it. The second reason was that I was a bit bored of being myself and wanted to be somebody else for a bit. The internet is quite unique in its ability to afford us the opportunity to virtually be somebody else. The third reason was that it was a kind of experiment. Being an attractive young woman on the internet was certainly eye-opening for me, especially with the unsolicited dick pics. No, that didn't actually happen. In fact, most of the guys I interacted with on that account were pretty respectful, despite being a bit thirsty. The fourth reason, you'll recall that I said mere moments ago that I was posing as an attractive young conservative woman. The fourth reason was that I wanted to see if I was capable of defending a conservative worldview while still maintaining some semblance of humanity. I didn't manage to do any such thing, but fortunately nobody really cares when you're hot and sexy. Role-playing as a different person on the internet was diverting and entertaining for about 5 minutes. I find it far more comfortable to just be myself, with the volume turned up to 11. I mean, I couldn't go around in real life saying the things I say in the way that I say them without getting punched in the ghoulies on a regular basis, mainly because I'm not an attractive young woman. There certainly is a disconnect between the way you present yourself online and the reality of your situation. I think most people understand that you tend to present yourself on the social media as a little more successful than you actually are. Your bank manager perhaps scratching their head as to the disparity between how you seem to be a little better off than your bank balance would have us believe, that the size of your cock if you're a bloke, or the size of your tits if you're a woman or a bloke, are accentuated and exaggerated by camera angles rather than being representative of what's actually there. I'm not having a go, by the way, just making an observation that's borderline sexist, as it turns out. Anyway, this bit I'm doing right now isn't about you, is it? No, not everything is about you, you know. I was talking about somebody else. Somebody who isn't you. No matter what persona we present online, no matter how much we try to obfuscate our true self, you might try to convince the online community that you're a mini roundabout in Stoke-on-Trent and that your name is Barry, when in fact you're a fishmonger from Lowestoft whose name is Barry. But whatever wacky personality one might project into the ether net, some truth of who you are will out. My truth is that I wonder about usernames, especially in those internet spaces that require your username to be unique. That transition was a bit shaky, wasn't it? And now I've got a small problem. See, I wrote the bit I was going to use here late last year. I thought I'll just copy and paste it into this script and that'll wrap everything up quite nicely. The problem is that I read it and it's a bit shit. What I wanted for this routine was a relatively high energy bit to start off with, then for the middle to be kind of subdued and reflective to provide a nice contrast to the bit that would wrap everything up. Obviously that bit is no longer on the table. The basic premise was, what would it be like if we had to have unique names in real life? So, like, instead of being called Sharon Watson, it'd be Sharon Watson 4667. So there's 2 minutes worth of silly voices and stupid unique names, but it just falls flat. Believe it or not, I do exercise a modicum of quality control for my material, and sometimes shit doesn't make the grade. If I sign off right now, this whole routine is going to be the wrong shape with a dynamic that doesn't work at all. Don't worry, I'm sure I can come up with something. For example, I have been concerned with the notion of identity of late, especially as it pertains to the internet and social media in particular. Now, I was thinking of telling a bald-faced lie to get the ball rolling for this final bit, but then I realised that anybody who's familiar with what I do on this channel would immediately recognise that I was telling porky pies to ease into the subject at hand. See, I was going to say this. I've noticed on Twitter that corporate entities have been portraying themselves either as individuals who snarkily attack rival corporations by utilising humorous put-downs, or as individuals who say the kind of woke things that will resonate with a younger and more leftist demographic. But I can't say that, can I? Because it would obviously be untrue for two reasons. The first reason is that I'm permanently banned from Twitter for calling Tucker Carlson a cunt and saying that I would like to say so to his face, which I said as a response to a social media personality who had posted something scathingly critical of Tucker Carlson, who, you'll recall, is a cunt. The second reason is that I would rather have my bollocks taken on a hot date with a belt sander and a beaker of hydrochloric acid than listen to anything a corporate entity has to say. So, with that in mind, I'm just going to tell the truth. I didn't arrive at the subject for this bit because I noticed it on Twitter. I arrived at the subject for this bit because somebody else noticed it on Twitter and made a YouTube video about it. And I know right at this moment I'm also making a YouTube video about it. There is a marked difference between what they did and what I'm doing now, or did do, because you're watching this in my future. Now then, if you're unaware, there are corporations who roast their rivals on the social media, usually Twitter. McDonald's once posted a tweet where they said they were going to use fresh beef rather than frozen for their quarter-pounder hamburgers. Wendy's, another purveyor of hamburgers, snarkily responded, "Oh yeah, well, all of our hamburgers are made from fresh beef rather than the rotting, maggot-infested, rancid, cancer-inducing, artery-clogging so-called meat you use in your burgers." Or something to that libelous effect. A legal quirk of corporations is that, legally speaking, they are recognised as individuals with all the same legal protections as living, breathing human beings. But, as I'm sure you'll recognise, dear viewer, corporations aren't human beings. I mean, I can barely believe that the upper echelons of such entities are even run by human beings. Suppose I did slander a hamburger chain. What, did I hurt its feelings? Did it go crying to its mum because I said the meat they make their hamburgers with is fucking green? Green with mould and decay, that is, not green environmentally speaking. No, it didn't go crying to its mum because of hurt feelings, did it? Because, despite what the law says, it's not a fucking human individual capable of feeling anything. The only reason a corporation would find a slander actionable would be because it might hurt their bottom line. They are there not to amuse us with their pseudo-feuding on the Twitter, but to increase their brand awareness and make more profit. But brands being snarky on the social media with each other isn't the half of it. There's a far more insidious and reprehensible thing that some of these companies do. They go on social media and act like they're socially progressive. There's a brand called Steakums, which is presumably some kind of meat product. In one statement about their social media philosophy, they said this: The objective of the rant on Twitter was to spark attention, start conversations, and continue to break down the fourth wall separating the people behind our brand and the people following it with our stay come bless messaging. Breaking the fourth wall? Oh, so you think that people who follow you on Twitter are cognizant of the concept of Brechtian alienation? I don't think so. I'd venture they have no idea what the fourth wall is anyway. I mean, who in the name of fuck would take life advice from a corporation pretending to be a human being? What reasonable person would have any incentive to take progressive talking points from a company that is anathema to the environment and animal rights and, in fact, exists solely to make money? What kind of people are hoodwinked into believing, if only momentarily perhaps, that this social media presence is a living, breathing human being that cares about its followers rather than a company that exists purely to make profit? I'll tell you who. Fucking idiots, that's who. And what really annoys me, what really pisses me off more than them deceiving their audience into believing that they give a shit, is that their followers look at their tweets and think, hey, maybe I'll buy some steakums. Which, let's face it, was the whole point of the exercise in the first fucking place. It's advertising, right? That's what it is. And for those people too stupid not to engage with it, well, they deserve everything they get, which apparently is some kind of meat product. Business doesn't care about you. Companies aren't people. Their identity is non-existent beyond the slick logos they employ to brand themselves. Vacuuming up every last red cent to enrich themselves isn't a fucking identity. It's just capitalist machinery. Oh, look at that hamburger chain's snarky Twitter responses. No, why not take a different approach and not fucking look at it? Oh look, Coca-Cola is flying the rainbow flag. I feel so validated as part of the LGBTQ plus community. As a hetero-cis male, I can't speak for the LGBTQ plus community, but if I was gay or a lesbian, I'd tell Coca-Cola to fuck right off and would like to say so to their face. Obviously, I wouldn't say that on Twitter. Yes, they and others like them do Pride Month, but at the same time they give money to politicians who actively hate and try to legislate against the LGBTQ plus community. Isn't it enough that corporations run this country, run the world, that they own our politicians, that they've bought the legal apparatus so that they can continue to steal from us by whittling away our workers' benefits, our pensions, make us work ever increasing amounts of hours for ever decreasing amounts of compensation? Isn't it fucking enough that they've destroyed our planet, monetized the entire scope of human interaction, and endlessly forcing us to suffer through their advertising? Isn't all that bullshit enough without them trying to pretend that they're our friend on social media? Anyway, you know, something like that. Obviously not that. I would write something else, something funny, but the delivery and pacing would be more or less the same. I mean, you get the idea of the movement I'm going for in the routine as a whole. Then again, maybe I could leave it on a downward note. I'm probably just overthinking it. Yeah, I just cut out all that crap about social corporate media and go straight to the ending. That's the end of this episode of the Polemics. Be sure to hit the dislike button and don't share or tell anybody about this channel or the content. I want to keep it underground. Hopefully, one day, nobody will watch any of my stuff at all. Then I'll be one happy comedian.